The rain hammered against the windshield of my beat-up Honda as I squinted at the address on my phone. Penthouse 4A, Meridian Towers. The GPS had led me to one of the most exclusive buildings in the city, all gleaming glass and polished marble, the kind of place where doormen wore better suits than most CEOs. I checked the delivery app again. $8.50 for a 20-minute drive in a downpour, plus tip if I was lucky. The order was simple enough. Italian from Angelo's, the expensive place downtown that charged $30 for pasta. One order of fettuccine alfredo, one Caesar salad, one tiramisu. "You've got this, Zara," I muttered to myself, grabbing the insulated bag from the passenger seat. 3 more deliveries after this one, and I'd have enough to cover my electric bill, maybe even have a little left over for groceries that weren't ramen noodles. The lobby was exactly as intimidating as I'd expected. Cream marble floors so polished I could see my reflection, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my car, and a security desk manned by 2 guards who looked like they moonlighted as bouncers at exclusive clubs. "Delivery for Penthouse 4A, I announced, holding up the bag as proof of my legitimate business. The younger guard, a broad-shouldered man with a military haircut, frowned at his computer screen. "We don't have any deliveries scheduled for 4A. "Well, the app says 4A, I replied, pulling out my phone to show him. "See? Right here," someone ordered from Angelo's. The guards exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. Confusion, concern. The older one, gray-haired with sharp eyes, picked up his phone and dialed. "Mr. Constantine? Sorry to disturb you, sir, but there's a delivery driver here claiming to have food for 4A. A pause. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." He hung up and nodded to his partner, who pressed a button that unlocked a private elevator I hadn't even noticed, tucked discreetly behind a marble column. "4th floor, penthouse level," the older guard said. "The elevator will take you directly." Something about his tone made my skin prickle with unease, but I'd delivered to plenty of rich people's homes before. They were always a little paranoid about security. I stepped into the elevator, noting the way it required a keycard to operate. The doors slid shut with a whisper-soft sound that probably cost more than my monthly rent. As the elevator climbed, I checked my appearance in the mirrored walls. My hair, natural curls that I'd pulled back into a ponytail, had frizzed in the humidity. My delivery uniform, a red polo shirt with the Food Fast logo, was slightly damp from running through the rain. Not exactly the image of sophistication, but I was here to drop off food, not attend a gala. The elevator opened directly into a foyer that took my breath away. Where I'd expected a hallway with multiple doors, there was instead a single massive space. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of the city skyline, rain streaking down the glass like tears. Modern art hung on walls painted in shades of charcoal and cream. The furniture looked both impossibly expensive and somehow inviting, all clean lines and rich fabrics. And standing in the center of it all, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, was the most striking man I'd ever seen. He couldn't have been more than 35, tall and lean with the kind of presence that filled a room. His hair was dark blonde, swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw with just a hint of stubble, and eyes so pale blue they were almost silver. He wore black slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, the top 2 buttons undone in a way that managed to be both casual and devastatingly attractive. "You're late," he said, his voice a smooth baritone with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. Russian, maybe? Eastern European, certainly. I blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by both his appearance and his words. "I'm sorry. The traffic was 3 hours late, to be precise," he continued, moving toward me with the fluid grace of a predator. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind about our arrangement." Confusion clouded my thoughts. "I think there's been some mistake. I'm just here to deliver food from Angelo's. Fettuccine alfredo, Caesar salad, and tiramisu," he finished, now standing close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and masculine with notes of cedar and bergamot. My favorite. "How thoughtful of you to remember, my dear." The endearment sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with my damp clothes. "Sir, I think you're confusing me with someone else. I'm just the delivery driver. If you could just accept your food, I have other orders waiting." His hand shot out, not roughly but with undeniable authority, and plucked my phone from my grip. Before I could protest, he was examining the screen, his expression shifting from commanding to something darker. "B," he read aloud, his jaw tightening. The order was for 4B, not 4A. Horror washed over me as I realized my mistake. In my rush to get through deliveries in the rain, I'd misread the apartment number. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." "You'll stay exactly where you are," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a tone that brooked no argument. He handed my phone back to me and pulled his own from his pocket, pressing a single button. "Victor, we have a situation. The girl is here, but there's been a complication." "I'm not the girl," I protested, alarm bells ringing in my head. "I'm Zara Thompson. I work for Food Fast, and I need to deliver this food to the actual customer who ordered it." Those pale eyes studied me with an intensity that made me feel simultaneously visible and vulnerable. "Zara," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "A beautiful name for a beautiful woman." Heat flooded my cheeks despite my growing anxiety. "Thank you, but I really need to go." The elevator chimed, and 2 men stepped out. Both were built like professional athletes, dressed in dark suits that couldn't quite conceal the bulges of weapons beneath their jackets. They took one look at me, then at the man who was clearly their boss, and their expressions shifted to something between surprise and concern. "This isn't Anastasia Volkov," the taller of the 2 said, his accent thicker than his boss's. "No," the blonde man agreed, a hint of amusement creeping into his voice. "This is Zara Thompson, a delivery driver who seems to have knocked on the wrong door." "Sir, the Volkov family is expecting confirmation that the bride has arrived," the second man said urgently. "The wedding is scheduled for this evening. If they discover she's fled, then we'll deal with the consequences," the boss interrupted smoothly. His eyes never left mine. "Tell them the bride arrived safely and is preparing herself." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Excuse me, but I'm not anyone's bride. I'm here by accident, and I need to leave. Right now." The blonde man's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Miss Thompson. You've stumbled into something rather complicated, and until I can sort out exactly how complicated, you'll need to remain here. For your own safety, of course." "My own safety," I repeated, my voice rising with panic. "You're basically holding me hostage." "Hostage is such an ugly word," he said, moving to a bar cart and pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. "I prefer to think of you as my guest. An unexpected guest, certainly, but a guest nonetheless." He offered me one of the glasses. "Cognac, you look like you could use it." I didn't take the glass. "I could use my freedom. And my phone, which I notice you haven't given back." He glanced at the device in his hand, then at me, then at his men. "Victor, Dmitri, give us the room, and contact the Volkov family. Tell them the bride requests a few hours to prepare herself properly. A woman's prerogative." The men exchanged another of those loaded looks, but obeyed, disappearing back into the elevator. The moment the doors closed, I bolted for the button to call it back. I'd barely moved 3 steps before the blonde man was there, his hand catching my wrist. Not painfully, but with enough strength to make it clear I wasn't going anywhere. "Let me go," I demanded, trying to pull away. "Sit," he said, guiding me firmly but not roughly toward a plush gray sofa. "And let me explain why leaving right now would be a very bad idea." Maybe it was the authority in his voice, or maybe it was the fear finally catching up with my adrenaline, but I found myself sinking onto the sofa, the insulated bag with its rapidly cooling Italian food still clutched in my lap like a shield. He sat across from me in a matching armchair, relaxed and confident, as if we were old friends having a casual conversation rather than captor and captive. "My name is Nikolai Konstantin," he began, taking a sip of his cognac. "And before you ask, yes, you've probably heard of my family. We have certain business interests in this city." The name did sound familiar, tickling something in the back of my memory. News reports maybe? Rumors? Nothing concrete, but enough to make my anxiety spike higher. 3 hours ago, he continued, I was informed that Anastasia Volkov, daughter of Dmitry Volkov, would be arriving at my penthouse. We were to be married this evening in a ceremony uniting our two families. It's a business arrangement, you understand. Strategic, beneficial to both parties. That's wonderful, I said, my voice tight. But what does that have to do with me? His eyes held mine, and something in their pale depths made my breath catch. Anastasia Volkov has apparently decided she doesn't wish to honor this arrangement. She's disappeared, and her father, a man not known for his forgiving nature, will be expecting to see a bride when he arrives in 2 hours. The implication crashed over me like ice water. No, absolutely not. Whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking, Nikolai interrupted, leaning forward slightly, that you knocked on the wrong door at exactly the right moment. Or the wrong moment, depending on one's perspective. I am not going to pretend to be someone's runaway bride, I said firmly, setting the food bag on the coffee table and standing. This is insane. You're insane. I'm leaving. He didn't move to stop me this time, just watched as I headed for the elevator. The Volkov family owns half the city's construction companies. They also control most of the dock workers' union, and they have a very long memory when it comes to perceived insults. I pressed the elevator button. Nothing happened. Of course it required a key card. If word gets out that Anastasia fled rather than marry me, Nikolai continued, his voice calm and measured, it will be seen as a profound disrespect. Not just to me, but to my entire family. There will be retaliation. Blood will be spilled. Innocent people will suffer because two powerful families went to war over a broken promise. My hand hovered over the button. That's not my problem. No, he agreed, but it could be your opportunity. I turned to face him, curiosity momentarily overriding my fear. What? Nikolai stood, moving toward me with that same predatory grace. One evening, Miss Thompson. Play the role of my bride for one evening. Let the Volkovs save face. Let them see a wedding ceremony performed, witnesses present, contract signed. Then, when tempers have cooled and alternative arrangements can be made, you walk away. Free and clear. And what do I get out of this insanity? A slow smile spread across his face. Name your price. Money? I have more than you could spend in a lifetime. A house, a car, a business of your own. Name it and it's yours. The offer was tempting. God, it was tempting. I made barely enough to cover my rent and student loans, working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. The idea of financial security, of not waking up every morning wondering how I'd make ends meet, was seductive in a way I didn't want to acknowledge. This is crazy, I repeated, but with less conviction. Perhaps, Nikolai conceded, now standing close enough that I could see flecks of gray in his pale eyes. But crazy doesn't mean impossible. And right now, you're the only woman in this building who can prevent a war. I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. I deliver food for a living. I'm not equipped to prevent mob wars. You're equipped with exactly what I need, he replied. The right height, the right age, the right presence. His gaze traveled over me in a way that felt like a physical touch, assessing but not lecherous. With the right dress, the right makeup, in a dimly lit ceremony. Yes, you could pass for Anastasia, long enough to satisfy the contract at least. Pass for her, I echoed. You're saying I look like this woman? I'm saying that Dmitry Volkov has only seen his daughter twice in the past 5 years. She's been living in Europe, attending university. He knows she's tall, dark-haired, in her mid-20s. You fit the general description, in wedding attire with a veil. He'll see what he expects to see. The plan was insane, completely, utterly insane. And yet, a traitorous part of my brain was calculating exactly how much money I could ask for. Enough to pay off my student loans, enough to quit one of my 3 jobs, enough to actually have a life instead of just surviving. One evening, I said slowly, testing the words. Just a ceremony, then I leave. Just a ceremony, Nikolai confirmed. You'll play the blushing bride. I'll play the devoted groom. We'll sign whatever papers need signing, smile for whatever cameras need smiling for, And by midnight, you'll be back to your life. Richer, certainly, but otherwise unchanged. Except for the part where I committed fraud. His smile widened. The contract will be annulled within the week. A technicality, a mistaken identity, a clerical error. My lawyers are very good at making problems disappear. I studied his face, looking for deception, for signs of danger beyond the obvious. But all I saw was confidence in something else, a kind of desperate pragmatism that suggested he was telling the truth. He needed this to work as much as I needed the money he was offering. $50,000, I heard myself say. Cash, tonight, after the ceremony. Nikolai didn't even blink. 100,000, because I appreciate your willingness to help me prevent unnecessary bloodshed. The number took my breath away. $100,000. It was more than I made in 2 years of delivering food and working retail. It was freedom. It was security. It was everything I'd been struggling toward with nothing to show for it but exhaustion and debt. And you swear I can walk away after? I pressed. No strings, no obligations, no revenge from angry Russian mobsters? You have my word, he said, extending his hand. 1 evening of play acting, then you're free. And anyone who tries to harm you after this arrangement ends will answer to me personally. The way he said it, with absolute certainty and a hint of threat directed at anyone who might threaten me, sent an unexpected thrill through my body. This man was dangerous. That much was obvious, but right now, his danger was pointed away from me, and that somehow made him feel like protection rather than a threat. I took his hand, his palm warm and calloused against mine. 1 evening, I agreed, then I'm out. His fingers closed around mine, sealing our bargain. Then welcome to the family, Mrs. Constantine. We have 2 hours to transform you from a delivery driver into a bride. As he led me deeper into the penthouse, toward what I assumed would be preparation rooms and wedding attire I could never afford, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made either the best or worst decision of my life. Probably worst, my rational mind supplied. Definitely worst. But the traitorous part of me that had been hungry for so long, tired for so long, struggling for so long, that part whispered that maybe, just maybe, knocking on the wrong door was exactly what I'd needed to do. The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity that made my head spin. The moment Nikolai made a phone call, his penthouse transformed into something resembling a movie set. People materialized from nowhere. A makeup artist with a case full of expensive cosmetics, a hairstylist with hot tools and enough product to stock a salon, and a severe-looking woman with a dress bag who introduced herself simply as Katya and began taking my measurements with professional efficiency. "Arms up," Katya commanded in heavily accented English, wrapping a measuring tape around my bust. "Stand straight. No slouching." I obeyed, feeling like a mannequin as she worked. Through the open bedroom door, I could see Nikolai on his phone, speaking rapid Russian that sounded both authoritative and tense. Every so often, his eyes would flicker to me, assessing, calculating. "Your skin is beautiful," the makeup artist, a pixie-like woman named Svetlana, said as she began her work. "Such a rich tone. I have the perfect shade to make you glow." "Thanks," I mumbled, trying to hold still as she applied primer with expert strokes. "So, do you do this kind of thing often? Emergency bride makeovers?" Svetlana's lips curved in a knowing smile. "Mr. Constantine pays very well for discretion. What I see, what I do here, it stays here." "You understand?" The message was clear. "Don't ask questions, don't expect answers, and definitely don't talk about any of this afterward." The hairstylist, a man named Dmitri, apparently everyone in Nikolai's orbit had Russian names, was working on my curls with a skill that bordered on artistry. "We'll do an elegant updo," he murmured, more to himself than to me. Sleek, sophisticated, with a few strategically placed curls to soften it. A veil will hide most of the style anyway, but the Volkovs will want photographs. You need to look perfect from every angle. "No pressure," I muttered. Katya returned with not 1 but 3 dresses draped over her arm. "The Volkov girl, she is maybe a size smaller than you but taller. These will work. Try this one first." She held up a wedding dress that probably cost more than my car, ivory silk with delicate lace overlay, a fitted bodice, and a full skirt that would sweep the floor. It was simultaneously the most beautiful and most terrifying garment I'd ever seen. "I can't wear that," I protested. "What if I spill something on it? What if I tear it? Then Mr. Constantine buys the designer's entire collection," Svetlana said matter-of-factly. "Now stop talking. Your lips need to stay still." 20 minutes later, I barely recognized myself in the full-length mirror. The dress fit surprisingly well. Katya had made some quick adjustments with safety pins that she promised would hold for the evening. My hair was swept up in an elegant style that managed to look both effortless and impossibly chic. And my face? Svetlana had worked magic, giving me a bridal glow while keeping my natural beauty intact. My dark skin seemed to luminous against the ivory dress, my brown eyes lined and shadowed to appear larger and more dramatic. "You look like a princess," Dmitri pronounced with satisfaction. "I look like I'm about to commit fraud," I corrected. But I couldn't deny the transformation was stunning. A knock at the bedroom door preceded Nikolai's entrance. He'd changed into a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it had to be custom-made, the black fabric emphasizing his lean, powerful build. His hair had been styled back from his face, and he'd shaved, revealing the sharp angle of his jaw. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Something electric passed between us, an awareness that had nothing to do with our business arrangement and everything to do with the fact that we were both attractive people playing at being newlyweds. "You're beautiful," he said finally, his voice rougher than before. "You're not bad yourself," I replied, trying to keep things light even as my heart hammered against my ribs. For a possibly dangerous crime boss who's blackmailing me into a fake wedding. A corner of his mouth lifted. "I prefer businessman with diverse interests who's offering you a generous compensation package." Tomato, tomato. He crossed the room to me, and the others discreetly melted away, leaving us alone. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box that made my stomach drop. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is." "A wedding requires a ring," he said simply, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond that caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 directions. "This belonged to my grandmother. It's been in the family for 3 generations." I took an instinctive step backward. "I can't wear your grandmother's ring. That's too real. That's crossing a line." Nikolai's expression softened slightly. "It's just jewelry, Zara, metal and stone. What gives it meaning is the sentiment behind it, and ours is purely business." He lifted the ring from its velvet bed. "May I?" Before I could form a protest, he took my left hand in his. His touch was warm, his movements gentle as he slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me, as if fate had somehow led me to this moment, knocking on the wrong door and stepping into another woman's life. "There," he said, still holding my hand. "Now you look the part completely." "Nikolai," I began, using his first name for the first time. "If this goes wrong, if they figure out I'm not really Anastasia—" "They won't," he interrupted, his pale eyes holding mine with an intensity that was both reassuring and unsettling. "I'll be beside you the entire time. You'll speak as little as possible. Brides are expected to be nervous, overwhelmed. Your silence will seem appropriate." "And what about the kiss?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't weddings usually end with a kiss?" Something dark and hungry flickered in his gaze. "Yes, they do." Heat flooded through me at the implication. This was supposed to be business, a transaction, one evening of pretend in exchange for financial security. So why did the thought of kissing this dangerous stranger make my pulse race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear? "It'll just be for show," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. "Of course," he agreed. But the way he was looking at me suggested that a kiss between us, even a pretend one, would be anything but simple. A discreet knock at the door broke the spell between us. Victor, the tall guard from earlier, appeared in the doorway. "Sir, the Volkovs have arrived." "They're waiting in the ceremonial room." Nikolai's expression shifted from the man who'd been holding my hand to the commanding boss who'd first opened his door to me. Tell them we'll be there in 5 minutes. The bride needs a moment to compose herself. When Victor left, Nikolai turned back to me. Last chance to back out, Zara. The moment we walk through that door, there's no turning back until the ceremony is complete. If you want to run, run now. I should run. Every instinct I had screamed at me to kick off these expensive heels, hike up this ridiculous dress, and bolt for the elevator, to go back to my regular life of delivering food and struggling to make rent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It was safe. But safe hadn't gotten me anywhere. Safe had kept me trapped in a cycle of poverty and exhaustion with no end in sight. And the ring on my finger, the dress on my body, the money I'd been promised, they represented something I'd almost stopped believing in. A chance. I'm not running, I said, lifting my chin with more confidence than I felt. Let's go get fake married. Nikolai's smile was both proud and predatory. He offered me his arm. Then let's not keep your new family waiting, wife. The word sent a shiver through me that I tried very hard to ignore as I placed my hand on his arm and let him lead me toward a fate I couldn't begin to predict. The ceremonial room, as Nikolai had called it, turned out to be a converted ballroom in another section of his penthouse. I hadn't realized just how massive his living space was until we walked through a series of hallways that seemed to go on forever. The room itself was elegant and imposing, with high ceilings, ornate chandeliers, and walls painted in deep burgundy with gold accents, and it was filled with people. I'd expected a small gathering, maybe a handful of witnesses. Instead, there had to be at least 50 people scattered throughout the space, all dressed in formal attire that probably cost more than my yearly income. They turned as we entered, a collective rustle of expensive fabrics and murmured conversations that immediately ceased. At the front of the room, beside what appeared to be an officiant in elaborate religious robes, stood a man who could only be Dmitry Volkov. He was perhaps in his late 50s, barrel-chested with silver hair, and a face that had been handsome once, but was now hardened by what I imagined were decades of commanding an empire. His eyes, dark and calculating, swept over me with an assessment that made my skin crawl. "You're certain this is wise?" A woman's voice whispered beside me. I turned to find an elegantly dressed older woman with sharp features and diamonds at her throat. "She's not what we discussed." "She's exactly what we need, Mother," Nikolai replied evenly. "And the Volkovs are satisfied with the arrangement." His mother. Of course. I was meeting my fake mother-in-law at my fake wedding. This day just kept getting better. "We'll discuss this later," she said curtly, her eyes holding mine for a moment that felt like a warning before she swept away to take her seat. Nikolai leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "Ignore her. My mother would find fault with the Virgin Mary herself if she didn't have the right pedigree." "Comforting," I muttered. "Shall we?" He gestured toward the aisle that had been created between rows of chairs. I took a deep breath, hyper-aware of every eye on me, every whispered speculation about who I was and why I was here. The dress suddenly felt too tight, the heels too high, the ring too heavy on my finger. But Nikolai's arm was solid beneath my hand, and something about his presence, commanding and unshakable, gave me the courage to put one foot in front of the other. The walk down the aisle felt simultaneously endless and far too short. When we reached Dmitry Volkov, I expected him to denounce me as an imposter. Instead, he looked me up and down with those cold eyes and gave a curt nod. "She'll do," he said to Nikolai, as if I wasn't standing right there. Though I expected my daughter to have more presence. "Your daughter is lovely," Nikolai replied smoothly. "And I'm honored to join our families." Dmitry's gaze sharpened. "See that you honor that commitment, Konstantin. My daughter's happiness is my concern. Any harm that comes to her will be answered for," Nikolai finished. "I understand perfectly." The threat hung in the air between them, two predators acknowledging each other's territory. Then Dmitry stepped back, and the officiant began speaking in Russian, his voice sonorous and formal. I understood maybe one word in 10, catching phrases that sounded like family and unity and contract. Beside me, Nikolai stood perfectly still, his expression composed, but I could feel the tension in the arm beneath my hand. When the officiant turned to us, switching to heavily accented English, My heart began to race. This was it, the moment where I'd either pull off the performance of a lifetime or expose us both as frauds. Nikolai Dmitrievich Konstantin, the officiant intoned. Do you take this woman as your wife to honor and protect in accordance with the traditions of our families? I do, Nikolai said, his voice clear and unwavering. The officiant turned to me, and I felt 50 pairs of eyes bore into my back. Anastasia Mikhailovna Volkov. My breath caught. I wasn't Anastasia. I was Zara Thompson, a delivery driver from the South Side who'd knocked on the wrong door. This was insane. This was illegal. This was... Nikolai's hand covered mine, a gentle squeeze that somehow conveyed both warning and reassurance. Do you take this man as your husband? To honor and obey, in accordance with the traditions of our families? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable, and I could feel the tension rising in the room like smoke. She's nervous, Nikolai said smoothly, turning to me with a smile that looked genuine to anyone who wasn't standing as close as I was. Overwhelmed by the occasion. Isn't that right, my dear? I nodded, finding my voice at last. Yes, I do. The words felt like they'd sealed my fate in ways I couldn't begin to understand. The officiant continued, producing a document that looked official and old, its pages yellowed with age. The contract, as agreed upon by both families. A pen was placed in my hand, and Nikolai guided me to the table where the document waited. I stared at the Cyrillic script, unable to read a word, my hand trembling. Here, Nikolai murmured, pointing to a line at the bottom. Just your name. My name is... I began, but his hand tightened on mine. Your name is Anastasia Volkov, he said softly, but with steel beneath the gentleness. For the next 5 minutes, that is your name. I signed, the pen feeling like a weight in my hand, committing fraud in elegant script. Nikolai signed beside me, his signature confident and decisive. The officiant added his own mark, then rolled the document carefully and sealed it with red wax. By the power vested in me by the old traditions and the new laws, I declare you husband and wife. The officiant smiled. You may kiss your bride. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and, if I was honest with myself, anticipating. Nikolai turned to me, his hands coming up to frame my face with surprising gentleness. His pale eyes searched mine, asking a question that had nothing to do with the ceremony and everything to do with the undeniable attraction that had been building between us since I'd knocked on his door. May I? He whispered so quietly that only I could hear. I could have said no. Could have given him a chaste peck on the lips and called it done. But something in me, something reckless and hungry for more than the life I'd been living, made me nod. Nikolai's lips met mine, and the world disappeared. It wasn't the brief, performative kiss I'd expected. It was deep, claiming, a kiss that spoke of possession and promise, and something darker that made my toes curl in my expensive heels. His hand slid into my hair, careful not to disturb Dmitri's careful work, while the other rested at the small of my back, pulling me closer. I melted into him, my hands finding his chest, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fine fabric of his tuxedo. When we finally broke apart, breathless and slightly dazed, applause erupted around us. But I barely heard it. All I could see was the look in Nikolai's eyes, something between triumph and wonder and hunger. Well, he murmured, his lips still close enough that I could feel his words against my skin. That was unexpected. You started it, I managed to say, my voice shakier than I would have liked. No, he corrected, his thumb brushing across my lower lip in a gesture that was far too intimate for our business arrangement. You walked through my door. You started all of this. Before I could formulate a response, we were surrounded by well-wishers, a blur of faces and congratulations in both Russian and English. Dmitri Volkov clapped Nikolai on the back with enough force to stagger a smaller man. Welcome to the family, Konstantin, he said, his voice booming. Treat my daughter well, or you'll answer to me. I wouldn't dream of doing otherwise, Nikolai replied, his arm sliding around my waist in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. And you, daughter. Dmitri turned to me, his dark eyes assessing. You've done well. This alliance will benefit us all. I forced a smile, terrified he would see through the charade. But he simply kissed my cheek, his beard scratching my skin, and moved on to speak with other guests. You did beautifully, Nikolai said quietly, as we were led to a table set up for the reception. Another hour, maybe 2, and you're free. Free with $100,000 and a fake marriage certificate, I replied under my breath. What could possibly go wrong? His lips quirked in amusement. Your optimism is refreshing. The reception was an elaborate affair with champagne flowing freely, waiters circulating with caviar and other delicacies I couldn't name, and a string quartet playing classical music that probably would have been soothing if my nerves weren't wound so tight. Nikolai kept me close, his hand never far from the small of my back, introducing me to an endless stream of people whose names I immediately forgot. My cousin, Alexei, my business associate, Victor, my mother's sister, Galina. I smiled and nodded and spoke as little as possible, playing the overwhelmed bride to perfection. And through it all, I was hyper-aware of Nikolai beside me, the way his cologne smelled up close, the warmth of his hand through the silk of my dress, the way his eyes kept finding mine, holding my gaze a moment longer than necessary. This was supposed to be business. Just business, so why did every touch feel like it meant something more? Dance with me, Nikolai said suddenly, guiding me toward the small dance floor where a few couples were swaying to the music. I'm not a great dancer, I protested. Then I'll lead, he replied, pulling me into his arms with practiced ease. His hand settled at my waist, the other holding mine as we began to move. I'd never been much for formal dancing, but Nikolai made it easy, guiding me through the steps with subtle pressure and confidence. Thank you, he said after a moment, his voice low enough that only I could hear. For what? Committing fraud? For saving my life, he corrected. Make no mistake, if Anastasia had truly fled and left me standing before the Volkovs with no bride, it would have been seen as an insult worthy of retaliation. Blood would have been spilled, maybe mine. The casual way he discussed his own potential murder made my stomach clench. Your world is terrifying. Yes, he agreed simply. But it's my world nonetheless. I was born into it, groomed for it, shaped by it. I can't leave any more than you can leave your own skin. I looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw something beneath the confident exterior. Weariness, perhaps, a bone-deep exhaustion that came from constantly being on guard, constantly maintaining control, constantly playing a role. What would you do? I asked. If you could leave? He was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes distant. I don't allow myself to think about that. Wanting things you can't have is a weakness, and I can't afford weakness. That's sad. His gaze refocused on me, intense and searching. Is it I have wealth, power, respect? Men fear me and women want me. What more could I want? Peace, I said softly. Safety. The freedom to walk away. Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly for me to identify. You're an unusual woman, Zara Thompson. Because I think you deserve peace. Because you see me as a man rather than a monster. He pulled me slightly closer, the movement subtle enough that it wouldn't seem inappropriate to watching eyes, but intimate enough that I felt it in every nerve. That's dangerous for both of us. Before I could ask what he meant, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A woman had burst into the room, her designer coat soaked with rain, her long dark hair plastered to her face. She was tall, elegant despite her dishevelment, and her eyes, dark and flashing with fury, scanned the room until they landed on Nikolai. And me. You, she snarled, storming toward us in expensive heels that clicked against the floor like gunshots. You actually went through with it? My stomach dropped as I realized who this had to be. Anastasia Volkov, the real bride, the woman whose life I'd been impersonating for the past hour. Anastasia? Dmitri Volkov's voice boomed across the room. Where have you been? She ignored her father, her attention fixed on Nikolai and me with laser focus. Who the hell is this? She demanded, gesturing at me. And why is she wearing my grandmother's dress? The room had gone deathly silent. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on us, waiting to see how this drama would unfold. My heart hammered so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. Nikolai's expression remained perfectly calm, but I felt the tension in his body where we still stood pressed together. Anastasia, what an unexpected surprise. Unexpected? She laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. I told you I wouldn't go through with this farce. I told you I was in love with someone else. Did you really think you could just replace me with some random woman and no one would notice? Watch your tone, Dmitri growled, moving toward his daughter. You disrespect our family. Our family? Anastasia whirled on him. You mean your empire, your business deals, your alliance with the Constantines. None of this was ever about me or what I wanted. What you want is irrelevant, Dmitri snapped. You're a Volkov. You have responsibilities that I never asked for. Anastasia's voice rose, raw with emotion. I'm not a commodity to be traded. I'm not a chess piece in your power games. I'm a person, and I refuse to be sold to the highest bidder. Despite the disaster this represented for me personally, I couldn't help but feel a surge of sympathy for her. She was fighting against the same kind of cage Nikolai had described, pushed into a life she never chose. This is quite the performance, Nikolai's mother said coldly from somewhere behind us. But the contract has been signed. The marriage is legal and binding. Anastasia's eyes snapped to the document still resting on its ornate table. In 3 strides, she crossed to it, her hands trembling as she unfurled the parchment. Her face went pale as she read the signature. This isn't my name, she whispered. Then louder, her voice shaking with fury. This isn't my signature! This is fraud! The room erupted into chaos. Voices rose in Russian and English, accusations flying like bullets. Dmitri's face had gone red with rage, his hand moving toward something beneath his jacket. Nikolai's men closed ranks around us, their own weapons suddenly visible. And I stood frozen in the center of it all, wearing a wedding dress that didn't belong to me, a ring that wasn't mine, having signed a name that wasn't my own. Everybody calm down. Nikolai's voice cut through the chaos like a knife, commanding attention through sheer force of personality. Before anyone does something they'll regret, let's discuss this rationally. Rationally? Dmitri snarled. You've made a fool of me, Constantine. You think you can pass off some street whore as my daughter? The words had barely left his mouth before Nikolai moved. One moment he was beside me, the next he had Dmitri by the throat, lifting the older man onto his toes with terrifying ease. You will apologize, Nikolai said, his voice deadly calm. Now, the room held its breath. Dmitri's men had their weapons drawn, pointed at Nikolai. Nikolai's men had their weapons drawn, pointed at Dmitri's men. We were seconds away from a bloodbath in a room full of people in formal wear. Apologize to my wife, Nikolai continued, his grip not loosening. Whatever else she may be, she deserves your respect. Your wife? Anastasia laughed hysterically. She's not your wife. I'm supposed to be your wife, and I'm standing right here. Nikolai finally released Dmitri, who staggered back, gasping. But his eyes never left the older man's face. The contract states that I would marry a woman of the Volkov family. It doesn't specify which one. Everyone processed this for a moment. Then Dmitri's eyes narrowed dangerously. You married my daughter. I married a woman who introduced herself as Anastasia Volkov, Nikolai replied smoothly. In good faith, witnessed by your representatives, blessed by the appropriate religious authority. If there was a deception, I was as much a victim as you. I should have spoken up, should have confessed everything, thrown myself on the mercy of these dangerous men and hoped they'd let me walk away. But something about the way Nikolai was protecting me, the way he'd defended me against Dmitri's insult, kept me silent. This is absurd, Anastasia said. Look at her! She's obviously not me. Different build, different face, different skin color. The ceremony was conducted in good faith, one of Nikolai's lawyers interjected, stepping forward with the kind of confidence that suggested he was well paid to solve impossible problems. The contract has been signed by authorized representatives of both families. The marriage is legal under both civil and traditional law. Then it will be annulled, Dmitri growled. Annulment requires grounds. the lawyer replied smoothly. Non-consummation, fraud, coercion. Given that the marriage was conducted in accordance with all traditions and laws, and given that Mr. Constantine entered into it in good faith, the implication hung in the air. If Nikolai claimed ignorance, claimed he'd been fooled just as thoroughly as everyone else, the contract might actually hold. "This is insane," I whispered, finally finding my voice. "I'm not part of your family. I'm not even Russian. My name is Zara Thompson. I'm from Chicago, and I was just delivering food when you knocked on my door," Nikolai finished, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. "And introduced yourself as my bride." I stared at him, understanding dawning with cold clarity. He'd said one evening, then I could walk away. But he'd never specified that walking away would include an annulment. He'd never promised that our arrangement wouldn't somehow become real. "You lied to me," I said, pulling my hand from his. "I protected you," he corrected. "And I protected my family. Both things I promised to do." "This isn't over, Constantine," Dmitri snarled. "You want a Volkov wife so badly? Fine, but she's damaged goods now, used. When you tire of your little deception, when the novelty wears off, you'll have no one to blame but yourself." With that, he stormed from the room, his men following in his wake. Anastasia remained behind for a moment longer, her eyes meeting mine across the chaos. "I'm sorry," she said, and she actually sounded sincere. "I never wanted anyone else caught up in this. I just wanted to be free." "So did I replied quietly. She left, and the remaining guests quickly followed, uncomfortable murmurs trailing in their wake. Within minutes, the room that had been so full of life and celebration had emptied to just Nikolai, his mother, a few key advisors, and me. "That," his mother said with icy precision, "was a disaster. That," Nikolai countered, "was a solution to an impossible situation." "A solution?" She turned her sharp gaze on me. "You've married this woman. This complete stranger, this delivery driver. Do you have any idea what the other families will say? The scandal this will cause? I imagine they'll say I found a clever workaround to an arranged marriage I never wanted," Nikolai replied. "And that I managed to keep our alliance with the Volkovs technically intact, while freeing Anastasia to pursue her own happiness." "Sounds rather noble when you put it that way." His mother's expression suggested she found nothing noble about any of this. "And what happens when you want to end this farce? When you want to marry someone appropriate? Then I'll deal with that when the time comes." Nikolai's voice had taken on a hardness that suggested the conversation was over. "For now, Zara is my wife. You will treat her with the respect that position demands." After a final withering look at me, his mother swept from the room, her advisors trailing behind like ducklings following their mother, leaving Nikolai and me alone in the wreckage of our wedding reception. "So," I said into the ringing silence, "still planning to pay me that $100,000? He had the grace to look slightly guilty. "I think we need to discuss revised terms of our arrangement." "Revised terms?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You said one evening. You said I could walk away. You said—" "I said a lot of things before Anastasia Volkov decided to make a dramatic entrance," he interrupted. "The situation has changed." "Changed how?" He moved closer, and I fought the urge to back away. "We're legally married, Zara, under both civil and traditional law. That's not something that can be easily undone, especially not now that the Volkovs know about the situation." "So what? I'm just stuck being your wife? Would that be so terrible?" He asked the question seriously, as if my answer actually mattered to him. I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I don't even know you. An hour ago I was delivering food. Now I'm apparently married to a Russian mob boss who may or may not have just saved my life while simultaneously ruining it." "I saved your life," he said firmly. "Dmitri would have killed you for the deception. The only reason you're still breathing is because I claimed you as mine." "Lucky me." "Yes," he agreed, and something in his tone made me look up. "Lucky you, because despite what you might think, I take my commitments seriously. You're my wife now. That means you're under my protection. No one will harm you. No one will threaten you. You'll want for nothing. Except freedom," I pointed out. Freedom is overrated, he replied. Security, comfort, purpose, those have real value. Says the man who literally has everything. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I have everything except what I want most. Peace, safety, the freedom to walk away. Aren't those the things you said I deserved? The conversation had come full circle, and I realized with a sinking feeling that we were more alike than I'd thought. Both of us trapped by circumstances beyond our control. Both of us playing roles we never chose. What happens now? I asked, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the evening. Now, Nikolai said, I show you to our bedroom. You get some rest, and in the morning we figure out how to make this arrangement work for both of us. Our bedroom? I repeated. Singular? We're married, he pointed out. It would seem strange if we didn't share a room. But I promise you'll have your privacy. I'm many things, Zara, but I'm not the kind of man who forces himself on unwilling women. The sincerity in his voice, combined with the exhaustion crashing over me, made my resistance crumble. Fine, but this conversation isn't over. I wouldn't expect it to be, he replied, offering his arm. Shall we, Mrs. Constantin? I took his arm, the weight of the day finally settling over me like a heavy blanket. As he led me through the penthouse toward the master suite, I couldn't help but think about the delivery I'd abandoned hours ago. The food was probably ruined by now. The customer from 4B had probably complained. I'd probably been fired from my job. And somehow, impossibly, I'd gone from delivering dinner to being married to one of the most dangerous men in the city. My mother used to tell me that when one door closes, another opens. She never mentioned what to do when you knock on the wrong door entirely and step through into a life you never imagined. But as Nikolai opened the door to a bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment, filled with luxury I'd only dreamed of, I realized that maybe, just maybe, knocking on the wrong door had been exactly what I needed to do all along, even if I had no idea what came next. The master bedroom was a study in masculine elegance. Dark wood furniture, charcoal gray walls with accents of deep blue, and another set of floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering city below. The bed was massive, easily king-sized, with what looked like Egyptian cotton sheets and enough pillows to furnish a small hotel. The bathroom is through there, Nikolai said, gesturing to a door on the left. You'll find everything you need. Robes, toiletries, anything Katya thought you might require. If something is missing, let me know. I nodded mutely, still trying to process the fact that this was apparently my bedroom now. Our bedroom. I need to make some calls, he continued, loosening his tie with one hand. The gesture was oddly intimate, a glimpse of the man beneath the tuxedo. Handle the fallout from tonight. It'll take a few hours. You should rest. Nikolai, I said as he turned to leave. He paused, looking back at me. What am I supposed to tell my family? My friends? People will be looking for me. His expression softened slightly. Do you have family in the city? No. My mom passed away 3 years ago. My dad was never in the picture. Siblings? Close friends? I shook my head. The loneliness of my life suddenly stark in the face of his questions. I have coworkers, a few acquaintances from school, but no one who'd really miss me if I disappeared. Something like sympathy crossed his features. Then we'll craft a story. You met a man, fell in love, got married quickly. It happens. People will talk, but they'll move on. And my job? My apartment? I'll have someone collect your belongings and settle your affairs, he said. Your lease will be terminated. Your employer notified of your resignation. You won't need those things anymore. The efficiency with which he was dismantling my old life should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. That life had been hard, lonely, full of struggle with little reward. This new life, whatever it turned out to be, at least promised comfort. Even if it came with a husband I barely knew. After Nikolai left, I explored the bathroom, which was larger than my old bedroom had been. Marble everywhere, a shower that could fit 4 people, a tub deep enough to swim in, and a counter covered in luxury skincare products that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I caught sight of myself in the mirror, and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. The elegant updo, the professional makeup, the wedding dress that transformed me into someone sophisticated and wealthy, someone who belonged in this world of penthouses and private ceremonies. But underneath the costume, I was still Zara Thompson. Still the girl who'd grown up in a cramped apartment with a mother who worked 3 jobs. Still the woman who'd been delivering food just hours ago to make ends meet. Who was I now? Mrs. Constantine? Nikolai's wife? A fraud playing dress-up in a world where the stakes were life and death? I carefully removed the dress, hanging it with reverence in the massive walk-in closet that was already half full of men's clothes. Nikolai's clothes smelling faintly of his cologne. In the other half, I found an array of women's clothing that made the selection from earlier look modest by comparison. Dresses, pants, blouses, all in my size, all with the tags still attached. He'd been prepared. Even before Anastasia showed up, he'd been planning for me to stay longer than one evening. I should have been furious. But exhaustion won out over anger as I slipped into one of the silk nightgowns I found in a drawer and crawled into the massive bed. The sheets felt like heaven against my skin, and the mattress seemed to embrace me, encouraging me to sink into its comfort. I'd rest for just a moment. Just a few minutes to gather my thoughts, and then I'd figure out my next move. Sleep claimed me before I could form a coherent plan. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back, and I sat up abruptly, my heart racing. I'd married a stranger. I'd committed fraud. I'd watched a real bride show up to her own wedding and expose the whole charade. And somehow, impossibly, I was still here, still wearing an expensive nightgown in a master bedroom that belonged to Nikolai Constantine. "Good morning," a familiar voice said from the doorway. I grabbed the sheets, pulling them up despite the fact that the nightgown covered me perfectly. Nikolai stood there, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray t-shirt that clung to his muscular frame. He looked different without the formal wear, younger, more approachable, though no less dangerous. "I brought coffee," he said, carrying a tray to the bedside table. 2 cups, cream and sugar, and what looked like fresh pastries. I wasn't sure how you take yours. "Black is fine," I managed, accepting the cup he offered. The warmth felt good against my palms, grounding me in the reality of the situation. He sat in an armchair near the window, giving me space but maintaining eye contact. "We need to talk." "About which disaster from last night?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee that was perfectly brewed. "The fake wedding? The real bride showing up? Or the fact that I'm apparently stuck being your wife?" A corner of his mouth lifted. "All of the above, ideally." I set down my coffee, needing both hands free to gesture properly. "Okay, let's start with the obvious. You lied to me. You said one evening then I could walk away with my money." "I know." "That's it? You know, no explanation, no apology?" He leaned forward, his pale eyes intense. "Would you like an explanation or an apology? I can give you either, but only one will be honest." I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "If you want me to apologize, I can say the words. But they won't be sincere. I did what I needed to do to protect both of us from a dangerous situation. I don't regret that." The blunt honesty was refreshing, even if it wasn't what I wanted to hear. "Fine. Explanation then." Nikolai settled back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes watchful. "When I first made you the offer, I genuinely intended to keep my word. One evening, $100,000. Then you'd disappear back into your life. But that was before." "Before what?" "Before I saw how well you carried yourself. How naturally you fit into the role. How the Volkovs accepted you without question." He paused, and before Anastasia showed up and forced my hand. "Forced your hand how?" "If I'd admitted the deception immediately, both of us would have been killed," he said matter-of-factly. "Dmitri doesn't tolerate being made a fool. The only way to protect you was to claim the marriage as legitimate, to insist I'd been deceived just as much as he was." The casual mention of death made my stomach churn. "So what now? We're actually married?" "Legally, yes. Under both civil and traditional law." I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "This is insane. People don't accidentally get married. That's not how life works." "Your life didn't work that way," he corrected. But you're in my world now, and in my world, marriages are business arrangements. Strategic alliances. They have nothing to do with love. That's depressing. That's reality. He stood, moving to the windows and staring out at the city. I'm not asking you to love me, Zara. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking you to honor the arrangement we've found ourselves in, for both our sakes. For how long? He turned to face me. That depends. On what? On whether you can learn to be comfortable here. Whether you can adapt to this life. Whether you can become the person others expect Mrs. Constantine to be. The weight of his words settled over me. He wasn't offering me freedom. He was offering me a role, a performance that would last not one evening, but potentially years. And if I say no? I asked quietly. If I demand an annulment and walk away? His expression grew cold. Then you walk away with nothing. No money, no protection, and the knowledge that Dmitry Volkov considers you a loose end. How long do you think you'd survive? The threat was implicit but clear. I was in too deep now. Knowledge of their world, their business, their secrets. It made me dangerous to them and vulnerable to anyone who wanted to hurt Nikolai. So I'm a prisoner, I said, hating how defeated I sounded. You're protected, he corrected, moving back toward the bed. There's a difference. You'll have everything you need. Education if you want it. A career if you choose. Freedom to move through the city. To have friends. To build a life. All I ask is that you play the role in public and honor the basic terms of our marriage. Which are loyalty, discretion, and when we're in public, the appearance of a happily married couple. And in private? His eyes held mine. In private, we can be honest with each other. I won't demand anything you're not willing to give. The coffee had gone cold in my hands, but I barely noticed. What if I meet someone else? Fall in love? Something flickered in his expression. We'll deal with that if it happens. But for now, you're mine, and I protect what's mine. There was that possessive edge again, the one that should have frightened me, but instead sent a confusing thrill through my body. This man was dangerous, complicated, and offering me a life I'd never dreamed of. All I had to do was surrender my freedom. I need time, I said finally. To think, to process all of this. Take all the time you need, he replied, gesturing to the room. This is your home now. Explore it. Make yourself comfortable. My mother will be by this afternoon to begin teaching you what you need to know. About what? About being a Constantine, he said with a slight smile. It's not as simple as it looks. He moved toward the door, then paused. Zara, thank you. For what? For knocking on my door, he said. Intentionally or not, you saved me from a marriage I never wanted. That's worth more than $100,000. After he left, I sat in that massive bed, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my old wardrobe combined, and tried to understand how my life had changed so completely in less than 24 hours. I'd knocked on the wrong door, and somehow, impossibly, stepped through into a future I couldn't have predicted. The question was, would it be a future I could survive? Or more frighteningly, would it be a future I'd never want to leave? Only time would tell. But as I finished my cold coffee and prepared to face whatever came next, I couldn't shake the memory of Nikolai's kiss during the ceremony. The way it had felt like more than pretend. The way it had ignited something in me I thought had died years ago. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk, even if the risk was everything. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm that felt both surreal and oddly natural. Nikolai's mother, Elena Constantine, arrived precisely at 2:00 that first afternoon, dressed in a severe Chanel suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary had been. So, she said, settling onto the sofa in the living room with the posture of someone accustomed to judging and finding everyone wanting. You're the delivery driver who married my son. I bristled at her tone but forced myself to remain calm. I'm Zara, and yes, circumstances were unusual. Unusual, she repeated, the word dripping with disdain. That's one way to describe fraud, I suppose. With all due respect, Mrs. Constantine, your son orchestrated the entire situation. I was just trying to earn $8.50 plus tip. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by something that might have been respect. You have spirit. That's good. You'll need it to survive in this family. She set down her teacup with precise care. Now, let's discuss what you need to learn. Over the next few hours, Elena provided what amounted to a crash course in being a mob wife. How to dress for different occasions. Which families were allies, which were enemies, which were somewhere in between. The importance of appearing gracious while revealing nothing of substance. How to navigate social events where every word was analyzed and every gesture had meaning. You will be watched constantly, she explained. The other families will look for weakness, for any sign that Nikolai made a mistake in choosing you. You cannot give them that satisfaction. Choosing me? I repeated. He didn't choose me. I knocked on his door by accident. Elena's lips curved in a smile that was all sharp edges. There are no accidents in our world, dear. Only opportunities seized or lost. My son saw an opportunity and he took it. Now you must prove yourself worthy of his gamble. The weight of her expectations pressed down on me, but I refused to buckle under it. And if I don't want to prove anything? If I just want to live my life, then you'll die, she said simply. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually. Someone will see you as leverage against Nikolai, or as a loose end to be tied up, or simply as an insult that must be answered. She leaned forward, her dark eyes boring into mine. You don't get to be ordinary anymore, Zara. The moment you signed that contract, you became extraordinary, whether you like it or not. After she left, I found myself drawn to the penthouse's library, a room I'd barely noticed before. It was lined floor to ceiling with books in multiple languages, and I ran my fingers along the spines, finding comfort in their solidity. Here at least was something familiar, something that didn't require me to pretend or perform. I'd pulled out a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice when Nikolai found me. Elizabeth Bennet, he observed, leaning against the doorframe. Interesting choice. It's about a woman who refuses to marry for convenience, I replied, not looking up from the pages. Who insists on marrying for love against all practical advice? And does she succeed? She marries a rich man who's used to getting his own way, I said pointedly. Sound familiar? He moved into the room, and I was hyper-aware of his presence, the way he seemed to fill the space just by existing. Darcy learns to change for Elizabeth, to become worthy of her. Are you planning to change for me? I asked, finally meeting his eyes. I'm planning to try, he said, and the sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This arrangement wasn't what either of us wanted, but we're stuck with it. We can make each other miserable, or we can try to make it work. And what does making it work look like? He gestured to a pair of leather chairs by the window. Sit with me. Let me tell you about my day, and you tell me about yours. Let's try being honest with each other. I sat, curious despite myself. Your mother thinks I'm completely unsuitable. My mother thought Princess Diana was unsuitable for Prince Charles, Nikolai replied. Her opinion on appropriate matches is notoriously harsh. He settled into the opposite chair, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. She also said you have spirit. Coming from her, that's high praise. She said I'd need it to survive. She's not wrong. His expression grew serious. This life isn't easy, Zara, even for those born into it. There are rules, expectations, dangers that most people never have to consider, but there are also benefits. Protection, resources, the ability to help people who need it. You make it sound noble. Parts of it are, he said. I fund schools in neighborhoods the government has forgotten. I provide jobs to people who've been shut out of legitimate employment. I maintain order in communities where the police have abandoned their responsibilities. And the other parts? I asked. The parts that aren't noble? He didn't flinch from the question. I hurt people who hurt others. I take money from those who won't pay what they owe. I make decisions that keep me awake at night because there were no good options, only less terrible ones. The honesty was refreshing, even if the reality was disturbing. How do you live with that? By remembering that someone has to do it, he replied. If not me, then someone worse. Someone who wouldn't build schools or protect the vulnerable. Someone who would only take and never give back. He leaned forward. I'm not asking you to approve of everything I do. I'm asking you to understand that it's more complicated than good or evil. We talked until the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He told me about growing up as the heir to a criminal empire, about the pressure and expectations, about watching his father rule with brutality that Nikolai had sworn never to emulate. I told him about my mother, about growing up poor, about dreams of art school that had died when reality intervened. And somewhere in that conversation, between sunset and darkness, something shifted between us. We stopped being captor and captive, stopped being strangers bound by a fraudulent contract, and started being two people trying to understand each other. It was dangerous, this softening, this beginning of trust, but I couldn't seem to stop it. The weeks passed in a blur of lessons from Elena, quiet evenings with Nikolai, and gradual exploration of my new world. I learned which fork to use at formal dinners, and which families would smile to your face while plotting your destruction. I learned how to dress for gallery openings and charity galas, how to make small talk that revealed nothing while seeming friendly, how to exist in a world where every moment was a performance. But I also learned things about Nikolai, how he took his coffee black like me, how he was fluent in 5 languages but still struggled with English idioms, how he had nightmares sometimes, waking with a start before settling back into sleep, with a tension that suggested his dreams were darker than mine. We'd settled into an unspoken routine. Separate sides of the massive bed, careful not to touch, maintaining the fiction that this was purely business. But I couldn't help noticing how his presence made me feel safe in a way I'd never experienced before, how I'd started listening for his footsteps, anticipating his return from whatever business kept him away. It was dangerous, this growing attachment. But I couldn't seem to stop that either. 6 weeks after our wedding, Nikolai announced we'd be attending a charity gala together. "Your first public appearance as my wife," he explained over breakfast. "All the major families will be there. Consider it your debut." My stomach knotted with anxiety. "What if I mess up? Say the wrong thing? Offend the wrong person? Then I'll handle it," he replied calmly. "That's what husbands do. They protect their wives from consequences." The word husband still felt foreign, even after weeks of living as his wife. "Nikolai, we need to talk about this arrangement. How long is this supposed to last?" He set down his coffee, his pale eyes studying me. "How long do you want it to last?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I thought it would feel more like a prison by now, but it doesn't. What does it feel like? I struggled to find words for the complex emotions churning inside me. Like I'm waiting for something. Like this is temporary, even though I know it's not. Like any day now, I'll wake up back in my old apartment, and this will all have been a strange dream. "Would you want that?" he asked quietly. "To wake up and have none of this be real?" The honest answer surprised me. No, I don't think I would. Something shifted in his expression. A warming that made him look less like a dangerous crime boss, and more like a man who'd just received unexpected good news. "Then stop waiting. Stop treating this like a temporary arrangement. This is your life now, Zara. The question is whether you're going to live it or just survive it." His words haunted me as I prepared for the gala that evening. The stylist Katya had arranged worked her magic, transforming me into someone who looked like she belonged among society's elite. The dress was a deep emerald green that complemented my skin tone perfectly, with a neckline that was sophisticated rather than revealing. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and the makeup was flawless. When I emerged from the bedroom, Nikolai was waiting in the living room, devastating in a custom tuxedo. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he took me in. "You're stunning," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Katya deserves the credit," I replied, suddenly nervous under his intense gaze. "Katya deserves credit for enhancing what was already there." He crossed to me, producing a velvet box from his pocket. "I have something for you." Inside was a necklace that took my breath away. Emeralds surrounded by diamonds. Clearly antique and probably worth more than I wanted to contemplate. "Nikolai, I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you will. You're a Constantin now. You'll be expected to look the part." He moved behind me, his fingers brushing my neck as he fastened the clasp. The touch sent shivers down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool metal. Besides, it matches your dress perfectly. The gala was held at one of the city's most exclusive hotels, with security that would have made the Secret Service jealous. As we entered the ballroom, I felt every eye turn toward us. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The scrutiny was intense, overwhelming, and I instinctively moved closer to Nikolai. His hand found the small of my back, warm and reassuring. "Breathe," he murmured. "You belong here." The evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully neutral conversations. I met the heads of other families, their wives and children, associates and allies. Everyone was polite, but I could see the calculation in their eyes. They were assessing me, judging whether I was a weakness or a strength for Nikolai. I was making small talk with the wife of a construction magnate when I felt a presence beside me. Turning, I found myself face to face with Anastasia Volkov. She looked different from the rain-soaked fury who'd burst into our wedding. Tonight she was composed, elegant in a red dress that probably cost more than a small car, but her eyes held the same defiant spirit. "Zara, isn't it?" she said, her Russian accent more pronounced than I remembered. "The accidental bride." "Anastasia," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite my racing heart. "You look well." "Better than the last time we met, certainly." She sipped her champagne, studying me. "I owe you an apology for that scene. I was angry at my father, at the situation, but I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." The apology was unexpected. "I understand. I can't imagine how you felt, seeing a stranger in your place." "Relieved, actually," she said with a wry smile. "You freed me from a marriage I never wanted, so thank you for that." "I didn't exactly do it on purpose. The best things in life rarely are purposeful." She glanced across the room to where Nikolai stood talking with a group of men. "He's different with you. Softer. I've known him for years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Heat flooded my cheeks. "It's just an arrangement, a business deal that got complicated." "Keep telling yourself that," Anastasia said with amusement. "But I've seen enough political marriages to know the difference between obligation and genuine feeling. What you two have, that's not just business." Before I could formulate a response, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd and leaving me with thoughts I wasn't ready to examine. The evening was winding down when trouble arrived in the form of Viktor Sokolov, head of a rival family. He approached Nikolai with the swagger of someone looking for a fight, his men flanking him like an honor guard. "Konstantin," he said, his voice carrying across the nearby conversations. "I hear congratulations are in order. Though I'm surprised you settled for a replacement bride. Couldn't convince the real thing to go through with it?" The insult was clear and the room went silent. I felt Nikolai tense beside me, saw the dangerous light enter his eyes. This was a test, I realized. Sokolov was pushing, seeing how far he could go, how much disrespect Nikolai would tolerate. Before Nikolai could respond, I stepped forward. "You must be Mr. Sokolov. I've heard so much about you. Though I have to say, the reality is somewhat disappointing compared to the descriptions." Sokolov's eyes narrowed. "Careful, girl. You're out of your depth." "Am I?" I kept my voice light, friendly even, while delivering a subtle insult. "I'm so sorry. I thought this was a charity gala, not a pissing contest. My mistake." Nervous laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. Sokolov's face reddened, but before the situation could escalate further, Nikolai's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "My wife has a point," he said smoothly. "This isn't the time or place for family business, Victor. Perhaps we can discuss your concerns in a more appropriate setting." The tension held for another beat, before Sokolov nodded curtly and walked away. The moment he was gone, Nikolai leaned close to my ear. That was either very brave or very stupid. "Can't it be both?" I replied, my heart still racing with adrenaline. He laughed, a genuine sound that drew looks from around the room. "Yes, it absolutely can be both." His eyes held mine with new respect. "You continue to surprise me, Mrs. Konstantin." On the drive home, Nikolai was quiet, staring out the window at the passing city lights. I could feel the tension radiating from him, though whether it was from Sokolov's insult or my response to it, I couldn't tell. "Are you angry with me?" I asked finally. "For confronting Sokolov?" He turned to look at me, his pale eyes unreadable in the dim light of the car. "I'm trying to decide if I'm angry or impressed. Possibly both. He insulted me. Insulted us. Was I supposed to just stand there and take it? Most women in your position would have." His expression softened. "But you're not most women, are you?" "I don't know what I am anymore," I admitted. 6 weeks ago I was a delivery driver. Now I'm defending my honor at society galas and wearing jewelry that costs more than I made in a year. I don't recognize my own life. Do you regret it? The question was asked carefully, as if my answer mattered more than he wanted to admit. I thought about it, really thought about it. My old life had been hard, lonely, a constant struggle just to survive. This new life was complicated, dangerous, confusing, but it was also exciting, meaningful, full of possibility, and there was Nikolai. Dangerous, complicated Nikolai, who looked at me like I was something precious, who protected me without smothering me, who was teaching me that strength came in many forms, not just the kind I'd learned surviving on my own. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. Not anymore." The car pulled up to the building, but neither of us moved to get out. The space between us felt charged, full of unspoken words and unexplored feelings. "Zara," Nikolai began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "That night, our wedding, the kiss, was just for show," I finished, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "No," he said firmly. "It wasn't, at least not for me." My breath caught. "Nikolai." "I know this started as a business arrangement," he continued, "a solution to an impossible situation. But somewhere along the way it became something more, at least for me." His hand reached out, cupping my face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his dangerous reputation. "Tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you feel it too." I should have lied. Should have maintained the safe distance between us, kept our relationship professional and uncomplicated. But I was tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of denying what had been growing between us since that first night. "You're not alone," I whispered. He kissed me then. Not the performative kiss from our wedding, but something real and raw and desperate. I melted into him, my hands finding his hair, pulling him closer. All the tension of the past weeks, all the careful distance we'd maintained, collapsed in that moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "Come upstairs with me, not as my fake wife playing a role, but as yourself, as Zara." "And if I do?" I asked, my voice shaky with want and uncertainty. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we stop pretending this is just business. It means we explore what's between us, whatever that turns out to be." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "It means I stop sleeping on my side of the bed wishing you were closer." The admission sent heat flooding through me. I thought I was the only one lying awake. His smile was both tender and predatory. "Not even close." We barely made it through the door to the penthouse before we were on each other again. Weeks of tension and denial poured out in desperate kisses and wandering hands. He backed me toward the bedroom, our path marked by discarded articles of clothing. His jacket, my heels, his tie, my necklace carefully placed aside. By the time we reached the bed, we were both breathless, trembling with need. He paused, looking down at me with eyes that held both desire and something deeper. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "Once we do this, there's no going back to what we were." "Good," I replied, pulling him down to me. "I don't want to go back." The night passed in a haze of sensation and discovery. He was both gentle and passionate, attentive to my needs while revealing his own. And when we finally collapsed together, exhausted and satisfied, I felt something click into place. This wasn't just sex. This was a claiming, a choosing, a commitment that went beyond any contract or arrangement. I belonged here. Not because circumstances had forced it, but because I wanted to. In the morning, I woke to find Nikolai already awake, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. That I knocked on the right door, he replied. Or rather, you did. I laughed, snuggling closer to him. I knocked on the wrong door. Did you? His arms tightened around me. Because from where I'm lying, it seems like exactly the right door. Over the following months, we settled into a life that was both strange and wonderful. I took classes at the university, finally pursuing the art degree I'd abandoned years ago. Nikolai supported every step, converting one of the penthouse's spare rooms into a proper studio where I could create without worrying about affording supplies. I learned more about his business, the legitimate and less legitimate aspects. He never hid the truth from me, never tried to pretend he was something he wasn't. And gradually, I came to understand what he'd meant about it being more complicated than good or evil. The neighborhoods where his influence kept order were safer than those left to chaos. The people he employed were loyal because he took care of them, protected them, gave them opportunities they'd never have otherwise. Was it perfect? No. There were still moments that made me uncomfortable, decisions I didn't agree with, lines I wouldn't have crossed. But there was also genuine good being done, lives being improved, communities being protected. And there was Nikolai. My husband in more than just name now, the man who'd gone from stranger to protector to partner to something I was almost afraid to name. One evening, 6 months after our wedding, we stood at the penthouse windows watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and pink. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Knocking on my door instead of the right one? I leaned into him, feeling his arms wrap around me from behind. Every morning when your mother calls to lecture me about proper etiquette. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest against my back. She means well. She means to make sure I don't embarrass the family name. Same thing, in her mind. He pressed a kiss to my temple. But seriously, are you happy? I thought about my old life. The loneliness, the struggle, the constant worry about money and safety. Then I thought about this life. The complications, yes, but also the security, the purpose, the love I'd found in the most unexpected place. I'm happy, I said, turning in his arms to face him. Are you? His smile was soft, genuine, the expression he reserved only for me. I married a woman who knocked on the wrong door and turned my entire life upside down. Of course I'm happy. Even though I wasn't the bride you were expecting, especially because you weren't the bride I was expecting. He cupped my face in his hands, his pale eyes intense. Anastasia would have been a business arrangement, a political alliance. With you, I got something I never thought I'd have, something I didn't even know I wanted. What's that? A partnership, a real marriage, someone who sees all of me, the good and the bad, and chooses to stay anyway. His forehead rested against mine. I love you, Zara Konstantin. I think I have since you stood up to Dmitry Volkov without flinching. Tears pricked my eyes. I love you too. Even though you essentially trapped me into marrying you through a combination of circumstances and strategic withholding of information. In my defense, I had no idea you'd turn out to be perfect for me. Perfect? I laughed. I'm a former delivery driver playing at being a mob wife. How is that perfect? You're brave, he said seriously. Strong, compassionate. You challenge me to be better while accepting who I am. You fit into my world while maintaining your own identity. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me want to be worthy of you. His lips brushed mine softly. That's pretty damn perfect from where I'm standing. We kissed as the sun set, over the city. Two people who'd found each other through the most improbable circumstances. A knock on the wrong door that had opened into the right life. Later that night, as we lay in bed together, no longer maintaining careful distance but tangled in each other's arms, I thought about fate and choice and the strange paths life sometimes takes. I'd been delivering food, trying to make ends meet, living a life of quiet desperation and fading dreams. One wrong number, one misread address, one knock on the wrong door had changed everything. Had it been chance? Or had some part of me, some unconscious instinct, known exactly what I was doing when I'd stepped into that elevator? I'd never know for sure. But lying there in Nikolai's arms, wearing his grandmother's ring that no longer felt borrowed, in a penthouse that had become home, I decided it didn't matter. I'd knocked on the wrong door, and found exactly where I was meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Nikolai murmured sleepily. "About how I used to make $8.50 per delivery," I replied. "Plus tip if I was lucky." He laughed quietly. "And now? Now I have everything I never knew I wanted." His arms tightened around me. "We both do." As I drifted, off to sleep, I smiled at the memory of that rainy night, the insulated bag of Italian food, the nervous approach to a door that should have belonged to someone else. My mother used to tell me that when one door closes, another opens. She never mentioned what happens when you knock on the wrong door entirely. Turns out, sometimes the wrong door is exactly the right one. You just have to be brave enough to walk through it. And stay.